welcome to our film presentation about Good Morning Vietnam. So the movie is about Adrian Cronauer, who's put on a new assignment from Greece to host a local radio show in Saigon, Vietnam, during the time of the war escalating in 1965. He takes on the local radio station with his sense of humor as well as his taste in music, which is more accurate of music we think of when we remember the Vietnam War today. Cronauer follows a local Vietnamese girl named Trin to an English class, which he ends up taking over, and meets Trin's brother Tuan in his attempt to be with Trin. At the local GI bar, Cronauer is pulled away by Tuan moments before a bomb explodes in the bar, leaving a few U.S. servicemen dead and others injured as well. Cronauer tries to report the incident on the radio station right away after the horror he just witnessed. He is cut off by his superior since it was unofficial news. Cronauer is then placed on temporary suspension until he is reinstated. Cronauer and his partner Garlic go out to a village called Anlock, where some of the troops are stationed, and are derailed by a lane mine to their jeep on their way there, and hide out from the Viet Cong until Tuan attempts to rescue them with a stolen truck, but can't start it once he finds them. So they walk their way back to Saigon until helicopters spot them walking. When Cronauer gets back to the station, he is met by Sergeant Dickerson, where he tells him Tuan is actually part of a terrorist group with the Viet Cong, and is the one who planned the bomb at the local GI bar, which makes sense why Tuan pulled Cronauer out before the explosion. Cronauer's association with Tuan causes this honorable discharge with General Taylor, who comes in and tells him this could give the Army a black eye, despite the generals liking his comic style as opposed to Lieutenant Hawk and General Dickerson. The general says he can't cover for him this time. This ends Cronauer's stint in Vietnam and is forced to leave the country and have the show go on without him. Cronauer hunts down Tuan in the climax of the movie, where Cronauer asks him why he did it, and Tuan painfully informs him he sees the U.S. as the enemy and not as an ally trying to help Vietnam, and disappears after that. Then the movie ends with Cronauer playing a baseball game with his English language class, and then moves the movie to a more light-hearted note as Cronauer leaves Vietnam.
Good Morning Vietnam sort of downplays the severity of war, and it definitely portrays the soldiers as like carefree, and it doesn't frequently show the like realistic, horrific side of it. The real Adrian Cronauer said that the film was only about 45% accurate, and he says a lot of the other characters are fictional, and he doesn't like that the film portrays him to be anti-war because he considers himself to be anti-stupidity. He also says that if he had done a lot of the things that Adrian Cronauer does in the film, he would have been sent home much earlier. The film does what sort of a lot of like mainstream war media does, which is it sort of like romanticizes war. It makes it seem like fun and like manageable. And part of that was actually that's sort of a tactic used often to like get more people to enlist in the war. That was used especially during World War II, and it's just kind of like stuck around. But it only the film Good Morning Vietnam only really goes into like it only really shows like the severity of the war near the end of the film, when Tuan is talking with Cronauer, and he talks about how his family and his neighbors were killed by U.S. soldiers, even though they were supposed to be in Vietnam to help defend the Vietnamese people. But the rest of the film kind of focuses on Cronauer's life of sports and romance and mingling with the Vietnamese people, and it kind of just contributes to this like unhealthy glorification of war.
So we have some clips here to contrast Cronauer style to Lieutenant Hawk style as radio hosts. And you can kind of see the differences of how we remember the Vietnam War today.
Peggy Lee, Freddie and the Dreamers.
So you can definitely see the rock and roll music that Cronauer plays when it comes to the radio station. So here's what Lieutenant Hawk's broadcast was with polka music when he takes over the station.
Sir, in my heart, I know I'm funny. That's about as good a polka as you'll ever hear.
I'll pass it back on to Ben for the first part of the evaluation.
Yeah, so Good Morning Vietnam, it's funny. It's definitely funny. It's meant to be a funny movie, but it hasn't aged super well. The humor sort of reflects what was appropriate both during the Vietnam War and also in 1987 when the movie was made. You saw a little bit in that first clip. There's a lot of like gay jokes and like jokes about black people, and throughout the rest of the movie there's a lot of like objectification of women, and the girl who Cronauer pursues is a lot younger than him, and she sort of repeatedly rejects his like romantic advances, and he like continues to try and pursue her. So this is definitely kind of uncomfortable, but it was also like during the Vietnam War, this is what was appropriate. There's a Vietnam War museum in Ruckersville, Virginia, that has a lot of like authentic objects from the war. And some of the objects they have are bed frames, like where the soldiers slept. And there's graffiti on the bed frames that show like really racist drawings of Vietnamese people, because that's how soldiers regarded Vietnamese people at the time. And that's sort of evident in the film. Tuan touches on it briefly when he's talking to Cronauer, and he tells him that the Vietnamese people aren't human to the Americans. And there's another scene in the movie where some of the racism against Vietnamese people is shown, where the GIs start a bar fight over who brought a Vietnamese person into the bar in Vietnam. So yeah, I think Matt has a clip.
So the movie is definitely overtaken by Robin Williams' like comedic style as Adrian Cronauer, and with his humor at the time that may be out of the date today, it perhaps overshadows the true nature of war, and portrays it as a good time, quote unquote. So to conclude, Good Morning Vietnam is a 45% accurate portrayal of the war as the real Adrian Cronauer said. Most of the things that Robin Williams does in the movie would get him court-martialed with the real army. It's perhaps a shallow, funny portrayal of the Vietnam War, but would be bad to show someone who knows nothing about the Vietnam as their first movie about the war. But maybe a good movie at the end of a long watch-along of Vietnam movies, and that would end it on a more lighthearted note. After all, Adrian Cronauer is just one of the radio hosts during his time in Vietnam. He tried to use his humor over the radio waves to lighten the mood for the soldiers in Vietnam. And there's plenty of other radio stations that are trying to do the same thing. So it's definitely a more lighthearted, comedic movie about the Vietnam War. After all, it was a grim event in our history.